The impeachment inquiry continues, this time with former ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch. Now, she's an important figure, not necessarily for what she can reveal about the attempted quid pro quo with the president of Ukraine, because she was ousted from that position before that began, but because of the process that led to her being pulled out. And just in case you're not familiar with her and her history, she had already been removed from her post in Ukraine when all of those back and forths were going on. But Democrats say that she was the first domino to fall in this story, a model diplomat who lost her job because of corrupt people who then opened the door for more corruption that politically benefited Trump. That's sort of the narrative going into today. So as we talk about this, we're gonna reveal some of what she said about the changes she saw happening to the State Department during her tenure. And then we're also gonna analyze to what extent were the Republicans able to fight back against the narrative that we sort of alluded to there. So first, a couple of the big quotes from her testimony. She said on being pushed out, perhaps it was not surprising that when our anti-corruption efforts got in the way of a desire for profit or power, Ukrainians who preferred to play by the old corrupt rules sought to remove me. What continues to amaze me is that they found Americans willing to partner with them, and working together, they apparently succeeded in orchestrating the removal of a US ambassador. As foreign service professionals are being denigrated and undermined, the institution is also being degraded. This will soon cause real harm if it hasn't already. The State Department is being hollowed out from within at a competitive and complex time on the world stage. This is not a time to undercut our diplomats. And she went on to say, our Ukraine policy has been thrown into disarray, and shady interests the world over have learned how little it takes to remove an American ambassador who does not give them what they want. And she speculated a bit about how that might influence future foreign leaders in their interactions with US ambassadors, and how it might also influence US ambassadors, wondering what might I say either in formal negotiations or just in conversation with other workers that could end up with me being targeted for removal myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think what's particularly damning about Marie Yovanovitch's testimony, in addition to Giuliani's business associate's testimony, Lev Parnas, is the fact that everything that Trump is accusing the Bidens of doing is what he's actually doing, right? So Lev Parnas has shared through his lawyer that Giuliani wanted to essentially work with some of the Russian-backed Ukrainians to push out people like Marie Yovanovitch, because she was actually fighting hard to root out corruption in Ukraine. And so when Trump claims, and when Republicans who are defending Trump claim that all they wanted to do was investigate the Bidens because they were concerned about corruption, just understand that it is actually the exact opposite. The correct way of interpreting what's going on is that Trump worked with Giuliani and these two Soviet-born business associates of Giuliani's to push out ambassadors and US officials who were working hard to root out corruption in Ukraine. That's what's really going on.
Yeah, this administration is masterful in how it projects out, right? And it's able to project out and basically denigrate and disparage others for the crimes that they most heinously commit. And they're somehow able to do that because they have some sort of base or foundation in their support network that allow them to sustain themselves by basically calling others out for the things that they do worse than anyone else. I mean, just as an example, the call outs of Hillary Clinton, right, in 2016, when the level of corruption that we now found out that Trump and his team were engaging with, including with the examples like Cambridge Analytica, were pretty profound and deep. So I think that's sort of something we see as a common theme when it comes to this presidency, which is more than anything the ability to just call others names and actually have an effect. They're effective at doing that. It actually undermines these folks, and that's the second point I want to make. That the level of intimidation that President Trump is able to get away with and his team is kind of remarkable. And why does that exist, and how does that exist, and how is that still effective now? And you can see in her tearful testimony from today how personally affected she is by all of this. And then the last major point I really want to make is another attack on a classic American institution, not one that is immune from critique. Right? There are lots of issues with our foreign service, just like there are even larger issues with our military. But if you notice, or with groups like NATO, for example, but if you notice actually what President Trump is able to do, again, quite effectively, is attack and root out and take away sort of the grounds and the bones and the real foundation of lifers in the Foreign Service, because that's an important point. She is not some sort of Republican or Democrat. She's sort of an institutional lifer who is now being undermined and was fired.
Yeah, and just briefly on the projection that you were talking about, that Rudy was sort of doing the same thing he was claiming the Bidens were doing. It's according to breaking news this morning, it's even more direct in that what we're finding out from Parnas and Fruman is that he was trying to personally profit from the Ukrainian natural gas exploration. So it's like it's exactly like he was going to also change his name legally to Hunter. That's how specific the projection is, which I thought. He doesn't have a Hunter face, you know? He has a Rudy face.
And look, I mean, think about it. It's killing two birds with one stone. It's an effort to help serve the business interests of shady figures like Giuliani and his business associates. And then at the same time, it gives Trump the ability to dig up political dirt on a rival, on someone that he is going to run against in his reelection campaign. I mean, it's so obvious and it's so clear.
It's both strategic and sociopathic. I mean, it's sociopathic in the sense that you can just kind of continue to be obsessed with lining your pockets, having more power, you know, lining the pockets of all your buddies, and who cares what the effects are. But it's actually quite strategic, and it's actually, and this is the thing that really does concern me honestly with these impeachment hearings. Different than the Mueller report, but some similarities, which is that all of this, in many ways, President Trump is quite effective in these moments. And how is that the case? Like, how does that come to be? How do these profound miscarriages of law that he represents end up not necessarily harming him that deeply, even if he does get impeached? I mean, that's a political question, but it's just something I want to put out there.
Well, I do want to give people at least a little bit of the actual testimony. So one of the most dramatic parts of this, along the way, the plot to get rid of Marie Yovanovitch involves a comment from the second phone call. So the first transcript that we got of Trump with the president of Ukraine talking about how she was going to go through some things. She was asked about that today at the hearing, and here's what she had to say.
What did you think when President Trump told President Zelensky and you read that you were going to go through some things?
I didn't know what to think, but I was very concerned.
What were you concerned about?
She's going to go through some things. It didn't sound good. It sounded like a threat.
Did you feel threatened?
I did.
Yeah, and I think, look, she was asked to sort of elaborate and she wasn't able to, and I think understandably so. I mean, what is she supposed to say? Well, it sounds like the president is threatening my physical safety. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, you're dealing with the most powerful person in the world, when you really think about it, telling another world leader that, you know, you're gonna go through some things. And it's coded language, but I think it's not so coded. You get a sense that it is a threat, right? Anyone would be fearful after hearing something like that. And remember, the reason why she's targeted, and I wanna keep repeating this because it goes against the ridiculous talking points you hear from the right wing. She's being targeted because she's actually trying to root out corruption in Ukraine.
Yeah, and we're also talking about a woman and not some sort of big politician, a sort of public servant, if you will. And you can imagine how terrifying that must be to her. And I guess to my comments earlier about, you know, how is he so effective? He's so effective because these sorts of words are scary for people, because there are quite a few goons willing to carry out this president's agenda, as we've seen again and again. And that's the saddest and scariest part of all.
Jamal Khashoggi, a US resident who was a journalist for the Washington Post, was murdered,
chopped up,
and chopped up while he was still alive, by the way, because Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman ordered it, and Trump tried to help him cover it up. Let's be very clear. So anyone who's fearful of Trump and this administration has the right to be, because he would absolutely try to help one of his cronies or one of these goons from a foreign country cover up some type of violent crime or murder. And it's disgusting.
And look, she, as we've pointed out, she has served for 30 years under Republicans and Democrats. She does not appear to be a particularly partisan person.
That's right.
But she pays attention to the news, and when she heard that initially, she must have been thinking, well, this is a quote from Donald Trump. And if I look around the world, all of the leaders most likely to actually kill one of their critics, he has publicly praised every single one of them repeatedly and called their most barbaric actions strong and powerful and good leadership. And so has Donald Trump killed anyone that we know? No, not necessarily his critics or anything like that. But he sure seems to admire the practice. And so if I were her, I certainly would have been worried.
And he has bragged about his ability to get away with almost anything, right?
Including murder.
Including murder. And in the case of our president, words do matter because they embolden and empower violence.
Yeah. So just briefly, I want to give you one media reaction to this testimony, at least the early portion. And this was Chris Wallace of Fox News, who felt like she did a good job of presenting her case, and Republicans were largely ineffective in responding to try to derail that narrative.
Yovanovitch's basic story remained unchallenged and untouched, and that story is that she was a corruption fighter, that she was working with the Ukrainian government to try to improve relations, that she was the victim of a smear campaign by Rudy Giuliani and some of his associates, that she was taken out of the embassy, told at 1 o'clock in the morning, you better be on the next plane, and that while the Deputy Secretary of State said you did nothing wrong, she got no bolstering, no vote of confidence, no support from top people at the White House or at the State Department.
And I just want to remind everyone that when she was concerned about Trump targeting her, and when she had a conversation with the State Department about it, first of all, Mike Pompeo did nothing to defend her, even though Mike Pompeo had worked with her in the past and knew who she was and knew that she wasn't some shady person. But more importantly, she was told by Gordon Sondland, well, if you're concerned about your job, maybe tweet some praise to Donald Trump and that'll save you.
Maybe stay at his hotel or something. It'll buy you a couple more weeks.
Run up the tab, right?
Yeah. So that was one of the initial reactions, and from hardly a liberal or anything like that.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.